Hello YouTube, it's Snowflarky's Emos here with another deck profile. Today showing off something pretty goofy that I just kind of put together for fun. This is my attack directly, there can only be one stun deck. So basically the kind of concept of this deck is I'm playing a lot of these monsters that can just attack opponents' life points directly, and by combining that with a bunch of good stun cards, I have a unique lower power level stun deck that allows me to use some wacky favorite cards, especially this one I have on front here, Rainbow Flower, was a childhood favorite of mine. So I just figured I'd put something together, and it's actually pretty fun to bust out for the casual duel night. So I thought I'd go over it. Just use, you just essentially play a bunch of cards that are going to stun your opponent from being able to play the game, and then you're going to ignore their monsters, attack directly with these little guys that you'll get to be a much bigger as with other cards in your deck. You'll increase their attack, and the goal is to just attack them directly and finish them off before they get the outs that are to the cards that are locking them down and out of the game. So without further ado, let's go into the cards. First, let's go into our monsters. I am playing one copy of Rainbow Flower. Rainbow Flower is one of the weaker cards in this deck, but it's got 400 attack. It's got the effect that says this monster can attack your opponent's life points directly. And what's very important is that it's a plant. One of the reasons this deck works is because there's so many of these different types of monsters, and there's usually about one for each type, enough to the point that we can easily max out on 3 copies of There Can Be Only One, which honestly is the real win condition of this deck. Because that can just stop so many decks from being able to play, and if they can't really play and we just attack directly before they get the cards that allow them to play again, well, that will be game. So Rainbow Flower as our plant. Next, I'm playing 2 copies of Wat Cobra. Wat Cobra is a 1,000 attack point monster. It's a thunder, which is different from a plant. So again, we got another type. It's an 1,000 attack point monster that can attack directly, so that's pretty good. A lot more than 400, and every little bit of damage we can get is pretty important. And the reason I'm playing Wat Cobra is, of course, when Wat Cobra inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can search a Wat card from the deck and add it to your hand. So I play a second Cobra just to thin it out of the deck and get things moving. Of course, I can summon it if I don't have There Can Only Be One up yet, but that's usually not a good thing. So it doesn't come up too often, but thin the deck, Wat Cobra. If you don't want to thin the deck, you can of course play Wat Giraffe, which has a little bit extra attack. Next up, I'm playing Drill Barnacle. Drill Barnacle is an Aqua type monster that can attack directly, and the good thing about Drill Barnacle is while it starts with 300 attack, it has an effect that when this card inflicts damage to your opponent by, you gain 1,000 attack. So the first time you do 300 plus whatever equip and attack buffs you give this card. But then on the next turn you get 1,000 more attack, and that continues to stack. So, if you can buy yourself a turn or two, then you'll have done real damage, and that is pretty important. Next up, playing a copy of Raging Flame Sprite. This one's a Pyro, so again, we're continuing with the different types. And while it only has 100 attack, it is like Drill Barnacle, where it will gain 1,000 attack after it inflicts direct damage. So I really like these ones that stack and gain attacks because they help end the game quicker from subsequent attacks, which is pretty nice. Next, I'm playing a copy of Jinzo Returner. Jinzo Returner, of course, has 600 attack and is one of those monsters that can attack directly. Also has an effect that when it's destroyed would let you special summon a Jinzo, but that is not important in this. That is not important in this build because we're not going to play Jinzo. We're just playing it because it's a machine. Next up, we have Sky Star Ray, which is a 600 attack Sea Serpent. So again, another different type that can attack directly. And of course, at the end of the battle phase, if this card attacked directly, banish this card until your next standby phase. So we can use it to dodge being removed, which is pretty cool. But the only problem is that means we don't really want to equip any cards to this unless it's going to be the game-winning push. But that's fine because we have plenty of other targets to use our equips on. And of course, last, I'm playing a copy of Rapid Warrior. This one's a warrior type monster, so it completes our grouping of all different types, which is the real reason this deck can win with There Can Only Be One. And of course, this card says during your main phase, you can activate this card's effect, and if you do, it can attack your opponent directly this turn, but other monsters cannot attack during the turn you activate this effect. So this one is, it's got 1200 attack, which is the highest other than Watt Cobra on the baseline, which is pretty good. But that, that thing that makes it so only this card can attack does make it kind of weak if you have another monster or two. But, if you don't, it still suffices and enough that it warrants me running the one copy of this card in my deck. And that is it for the monster cards. This is a stun demise style deck, so low monster count is important. Next up, going into our spell cards, I am playing one copy of the Seal of Orichalcos. This is quite a fun card that, I wish I was able to get more uses for. Also, take note of the Seal of Orichalcos on the Seal of Orichalcos background. So that's pretty cool. But Seal of Orichalcos is just a field spell that says all monsters you control gain 500 attack once per card. This card cannot be destroyed by card effects. And while you control 2 or more face-up attack position monsters, your opponent cannot target your monsters with the lowest attack, which is pretty nice, especially if we beef up one of our monsters with equipped spells so that it actually has a high attack that can't be got over. And all your other ones are still small, well, they won't be able to be attacked, which is pretty cool. And the field-wide 500 attack buff is pretty nice. And then, of course, in exchange, all you basically can't do is you can't special summon monsters from your extra deck. But that's okay. We don't do that in this deck anyway. So, Seal of Orichalcos, it's a fun card to play in here. It might be a little more optimal to side it out for a third copy of this next card that I'm playing 2 of, Mage Power. Mage Power is pretty nice because we equip it to a monster and it gains 500 attack and defense for every spell and trap card on the field. We play lots of traps in this deck, so it's very easy to have set 4, set 5, and that means this could be a 2,000 to 2,500 attack buff, which on a monster that's just attacking directly is very nice. We want to pile on that damage because the goal is we need to do enough damage to our opponent quickly before they can draw the outs to our cards that are stunning them out of the game. And so Mage Power is very nice for getting that little stat boost. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Since we're not using our extra deck, we'll gladly turn it into extra cards. Banishing 3 to 6 allows us to draw 1 card for every 3 that we banished. So by banishing 6, we are drawing 2 cards, which is pretty nice. Next up, on top of that, I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Duality. We're also not doing much special summoning in this deck, so we're going to use Duality as a consistency booster. We look at the top 3 cards of our deck, add 1 to our hand, shuffle the rest back in. That gets us, whatever we're looking for. If we need an equip for enough damage to finish off the game. If we need a specific trap card to keep ourselves safe. If we want one of our there can only be ones, which is what we are definitely fishing for as fast as we can. Pot of Duality will take care of that. And then last for the spells, I am playing 1 copy of Card of Demise. Unfortunately, in the TCG, Card of Demise is limited, so we are only able to play 1 of this card. But that's alright, because Card of Demise, as long as we don't play Extravagance on the same turn, we can use this card. So it basically draws us cards until we have up to 3 in our hand, which is pretty nice. If we played everything, don't have any cards in our hand, we draw 3 cards. And then, of course, we can't special summon during the turn we play this card, which isn't a big deal. At the end phase, we discard all our cards from the hand to the graveyard, which also isn't a big deal because most things we get are spell and traps that we'll be able to set in the back row and not lose. So with those trade-offs, we're just mostly drawing 2 or 3 cards just about every time with Card of Demise, which is pretty sweet and definitely warrants playing it. If it wasn't limited, we would definitely be playing some more of this. But that is it for the spell cards. Next, let's go into our trap cards. I am playing 3 copies of There Can Be Only One. Now this card right here is our deck's win con. There Can Only Be One is an incredibly powerful floodgate. Each player can only control 1 monster of each type. And basically they have to send all other monsters of the same type from their field to the graveyard. So that's the reason why we are playing all these different types in this deck. We got our Rainbow Flower, that's a plant. We got our Watt Cobra, that's a thunder. We got our Drill Barnacle, that's an aqua, because these are all different types, so it doesn't impede us from summoning. But against most decks, this will stop a lot of good decks from playing. So do note that your ability to succeed with this deck will kind of be dependent on whether this card wins you the matchup. Just the kind of cost we have to, the kind of card we got to use if we want to play some weak cards like that. That's why they make cards like this, so that you can win with them. And so we're playing 3. There can only be 1. Next up, I am playing 3 Blazing Mirror Force. So with there can only be 1 up on the field. They'll be really limited in the amount of monsters they can summon on the field, maybe 1 or 2, and it'll be hard for them to go into their extra deck, with their build borders essentially. So with that, it means they mostly just have 1 monster that can probably attack over yours, because your monsters will all have pretty small attacks, especially starting off. So we want to be able to have that trading removal ready to go. Blazing Mirror Force is a really good card for this because it destroys our opponent's attack position monsters when they declare an attack, and it burns both players for life point damage equal to half the total attack of the monsters destroyed, which is pretty sweet. We want that burn damage because that burn damage lowers their life points, and that gets us closer to ending the duel sooner. And a deck like this is all about ending the duel as quickly as you possibly can before they draw the out to there can be only 1 or your stun cards. Next, to go along with that, I am playing 3 copies of Storming Mirror Force. Storming Mirror Force is, of course, just a Mirror Force that will send all attack position monsters your opponent controls back to the hand. So that's non-targeting, non-destruction, so that gets rid of a lot of things. Now, it means they can summon them again next turn, but, buying yourself 1 turn is just 1 turn closer to the end of the game. And lastly, I'm playing 1 copy of regular Mirror Force to end my Mirror Force brigade. Mirror Force, it's just blazing, except it doesn't have the burn damage. You destroy all attack position monsters when your opponent declares an attack. We want to protect our monsters so they can attack directly, so Mirror Force does the job. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. This is our emergency say no button. If somebody's going to out, there can be only 1, or they draw a couple of those outs. Well, we want to hope that we have Solemn Judgment on hand ready to go so that we can just pay half our life points to negate that. Now, you got to be careful with this card and Blazing Mirror Force. You can put yourself in risk of being destroyed, but, it's that the more times this card will save you is far more than the amount it will endanger you like that. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Heavy Storm Duster. Now, this is a bit overkill for most matchups, but in my dueling circle, there are lots of spell and trap cards and back row decks. So I just want to punish them quite a bit with the Heavy Storm Duster. We don't want to run into back row ourselves. We want to be able to attack uninterrupted. So Heavy Storm Duster does a good job at doing that. If you play against decks that are not as heavy on back row or don't have as many spell and trap cards that you want to pop, sub this out for any other good removal trap or protection trap. Just always be having that matchup in mind. Next, I'm playing a copy of Solemn Strike and a copy of Lost Wind. Probably I might bump down a copy of Heavy Storm Duster, and if you were going to get rid of all the Heavy Storm Dusters because you don't need them, I would look more into cards like these effect negation cards. Solemn Strike, of course, is 1,500 life points to negate a special summon or the activated effect of a monster and destroy it. And of course, Lost Wind halves a monster's attack and negates the effect as long as it's a special summon monster, and it has the ability to be recycled, which is pretty cool. Both these cards are pretty good. I'm just playing 1 of each. Solemn Strike can be a little bad because you're burning yourself quite a bit between your judgments and your Blazing Mirror Force. You could risk getting yourself killed with that, which is not so good. And of course, Lost Wind, if there can only be 1 is up, then your opponent might not be special summoning much at all. So a little shaky. You can definitely look into other effect negation. It's kind of why I'm running only 1 of each right now, because I'm trying to see which one I like more in the build. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Phantom Knight's Sword. This is a nice card to have in this deck because Phantom Knight's Sword, we get to select one of our monsters, give it 800 attack, and of course, if it would be destroyed by battle or card effect, we can destroy this card instead. So that's pretty cool. Gives some of our gives protection to our attack directly monsters, and it also makes it so that they have more attack, which can help end the game quicker. And, you know, that can be really good, especially if your opponent tries to attack them with a weak enough monster that you can play Phantom Knight Sword and make your monster's attack greater than it in damage step. That will be really good. And so, you know, between protection and ending the game quicker, it's a pretty solid card. I've considered playing a third one. And last in our trap cards, I'm playing 2 copies of Waking the Dragon. I want to punish the Harpy's Feather Duster. I want to punish the Lightning Storms. I want to punish the Blind spell and trap removal. That's what I'm going to do with Waking the Dragon. Essentially, if this card is is removed from the field because of an opponent's card effect and is in the graveyard or banished, well, I get to special summon a monster from my deck or extra deck. And we will pack some powerful targets in the extra deck to summon off of this. I play this in a lot of these deck profiles. It's pretty good. People that I duel won't quit popping it. So, you know, I'm going to keep playing it till they stop. And that is it for the main deck. Moving on to the extra deck, I'm just playing 3 copies of what I consider to be Waking the Dragon good stuff. I'm playing 3 copies of Last Warrior from Another Planet. Last Warrior from Another Planet, of course, if this card is special summon, you destroy all monsters you control, which kind of sucks. But if you know, if your opponent pops Waking the Dragon and you don't have any monsters on board, Last Warrior from Another Planet says that neither player can summon monsters. So that's pretty good. Sometimes this outright wins a matchup if they don't have removal. What is important to note about this deck, though, is that if you have Seal of Orichalcos on the field, it won't be destroyed at first by a card like Harpy's Feather Duster or something like that. And Seal of Orichalcos specifically means that you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck. So I will say that as far as building this deck more optimally, you definitely would probably want to cut Seal for like another copy of Mage Power, or you know, something like a Defense Zone field spell, just something like that that could be useful. But you know, it's for fun, so I am okay with foregoing that sometimes. Or basically, you just use Seal of Orichalcos as like an additional finisher if you got a couple monsters on the field. But do just keep that in mind. Continuing on, I am playing 2 copies of Naturia Exterio. This, of course, would be 3 copies, but I haven't picked up my 3rd yet. It just got reprinted in the new Hidden Arsenal thing, so that'll be a good time for me to grab it here. You know, it's a 2800 attack monster that can negate spells or traps. So, you know, certain matchups, being able to negate spells and traps, and it's not once per turn, just will outright win you the game. So keep that in mind. While I don't have a 3rd Exterio, though, I'm just playing 1 copy of Nat Beast. It's just Exterio, but only negates spells. Usually that's what you need to negate anyway, so it's not that punishing. A little less attack, but, you know, a perfectly fine option. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon. It's a 3,500 attack monster that is unaffected by monster effects. Pretty sweet. And for that reason, I play it. It's pretty good. 3,500 means they have to kill it by battle or kaiju over it, so it has a very few amount of limited options. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Geomathmech Final Sigma, 3,000 attack monster that's unaffected by other card effects other than Mathmech cards if it's in the extra monster zone. That's fine. We'll put it in the extra monster zone because we don't have anything else that's going up there. So it's got 500 less attack than Ultimate Falcon, which makes it a little worse, but it does get the ability that if it does battle damage to an opponent's monster, that battle damage is doubled, and that is kind of a nice effect in this deck where we're trying to do as much battle damage as we can rather quickly. And last, I'm playing 3 copies of Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon. 4,500 attack monster that cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. Not as good as unaffected, but still pretty good, and especially for 1,000 more attack than Ultimate Falcon. Sometimes this card does enough. And additionally, this card is nice because instead of attacking, you could pop a card, so that could be a big deal. Comes in handy. Good to just have those options available. And for that reason, we are playing three. Three copies of all these cards means that we won't banish them all off of Pot of Extravagance, and we'll always have something to go into. So that is it for my attacking directly deck. Um, it's just a fun, silly, lower power stun deck that I can play in a more casual environment and still get to use some stun strategy, but in a weaker payoff that means less powerful decks are more likely to deal with it. So it makes it a fun thing to play and use at Duel Night, and just figured I might as well showcase it before I maybe switch it out for something else as far as sleeves. But it's a lot of fun. Lets me use Rainbow Flower, which is pretty cool. It's really fun to use Drill Barnacle and Flame Sprite, get their attacks up. So I enjoy it. It's just a fun pick up and play. But let me know what you think. Let me know, do you have a favorite one of these kind of monsters that attack directly? And let me know what kind of silly decks you might play in the comments below. I always appreciate hearing what's going on. Um, but thank you all for checking it out. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you all in the next one.